Hi and welcome to part 2 of our painting with wool project, Cornwall by the Sea. You are in the felt hub, and the first thing we're going to do is start laying down the sky. Now the great thing about needle felting a picture is that it doesn't need a lot of wool. You're going to be using really thin wisps of wool for most of the project, apart from some 3D elements, because it's all flat felted and it's all pretty much the same technique. So let's start getting this sky blocked in. Now I'm using carded wool here, but you can use wool top. It doesn't really matter what wool you use, as long as you lay it down nice and thinly and quite sparsely. Now I am starting just to show you how you can use the different multi-tools. This is a 3-needle tool, so if you want to speed up the process, you can use a single 38 star for the entire project. And I say 38 star purely because this is the needle that works the best on this particular fabric. This is quite a tight weave linen. I did, try all of the different felting needles. I tried a 36, tried the 38 and a 40, a bit like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and I found this one to be just right. So I am using a 38 star gauge needle. And again, I'll put the link in the description. If you don't have any felting needles, then you can pop over to the website and get yourself some. So we're laying down this wool, we're just felting away, pushing that needle just into the top of the foam and the wool topper that's underneath. The wool topper is really important because it will stop your wool from transferring into the foam, and it also protects the foam pad, so it's really good on waste. We're not adding to landfill here. You can also use your rice mat, a wool mat, anything that works best for you, but always use a topper. I'm just going to speed this up now with my punch tool. Now, when I'm working on foam with the punch tool, this one actually has 7 needles, but I always take 2 out and work with 5 because it sort of tends to bounce if you've got 7 in. And make sure you keep pulling your project away from the mat occasionally, just so it makes it easier to remove. Remember, all those fibres are going through. So I'm using this punch tool, and what you'll find is if you do have one of these punch tools, really speeds up any flat felting you are doing. I love it. It's one of my go-to tools for speeding up felting. It makes things massively faster to complete. And as you can see, I'm just blocking in this sky, and I'm not being too precious either, as you can see, about any sort of gaps. It doesn't really matter because it's a sky, especially. You'll get some sort of areas where it's quite nice to have a little bit of contrast. This is another multi-tool I'm using here. This has got 3 inline felting needles. So it's just a case of you finding what works best. But for a lot of the project, you will be using just one single needle, and the entire piece can be done with a single needle. Now, as you're working around the houses, you've got these lines, remember, in part 1, when you transferred the picture. So make sure those lines are just slightly visible. It doesn't matter too much, but just make sure that you can actually see them, so that when you come to create that border, which we'll go over later on, you can see where you're going. And again, if you don't have a multi-tool at all, you can just use 2 needles together, tape them together, use an elastic band, and that will also speed up the process. So continue to fill in the sky. What we want to do is get this blocked in completely all around the houses. Again, keep pulling it off your mat. And the great thing about this linen is as well, it doesn't distort at all. It stays really neat and really tight, so we're not going to get any distortion. Now what I'm going to pop in, just for a little bit of interest, is some sort of shadow to the left, as if there's sort of clouds drifting in, but because this picture is full of colour, even my moody sort of dark cloudy areas are still really colourful. I didn't really want to introduce anything dark unless absolutely necessary. For example, the roofs of the houses, and obviously the border, which makes the whole thing just pop. And what I've done here is I'm just putting little pieces, just little wisps of this sort of, it's like a purple mix. If you've got the kit, all of the wools that I'm using in this project that you see here are in your box. And this is a beautiful sort of purple and lilac mix. And I'm just dragging it out and creating thin, wispy areas of what would be a darker kind of cloud. It's really easy, and you can really thin that out. You know, if you take your single needle and you just drag that across very slightly, then that will just pull that wool over. I'm just going to continue filling in the gaps now with the blue sky. This is like a baby blue that I'm using here. Again, the carded wool, I think I mentioned. And as you see there, I'm just dragging that wool over with that felting needle. That's another reason why the 38 is good, because it's quite robust, and it won't break when you actually use it to sort of thin out and wisp out areas of wool. If you were using a 40, that will probably snap. And you don't need to be too precious about it. Just get the wool down, let's fill in this space, and then it feels like you're actually getting somewhere. And take breaks when you do this project. It took me about 6 to 8 hours to complete the entire thing. There's a lot going on. And then complete that area of sky, as you can see, around those houses. Carry on, and then this is where I have got to. So as you can see, I've gone around the houses, not particularly neat, not precious at all. And what I want to do now is just add some areas, some lighter areas. And I've got some really nice sort of white carded wool and some silk fibres in the form of Throster's waste, which we'll also be using on the sea later on. And what this does, again, it just breaks up that background, adds a little bit of interest. But I'm not going for those sort of cartoon fluffy clouds. I want those kind of high clouds. I think they're called cirrus clouds, the really high ones. You know, those really wispy, thin clouds that you see. They're super high. So I'm just going to add some light areas in there just to break it up and add some interest. And now that we've actually blocked out this sky area, it feels like we're really getting somewhere, and it can be done really, really quickly. I'm just spreading out this carded wool. That's the great thing about carded wool. You can get really thin wisps and it doesn't end up in lines, which you can get with the wool tops. So I like to use carded wool when I want to really sort of spread out an area and thin it as much as possible. And then I use my needle just to drag that wool along the sky. Don't worry about anything. You want the wool to come over the edges. We're going to tidy all that up later on, but you want those edges covered with wool. So bring that wool over the edges. And then I thought a little bit of this silk Throster's waste would be really nice, just to add a little bit of texture to the sky. You spread it out, and you just sort of going to tack it on. You're barely felting it on, really. What it will do is it will tangle with the wool fibres so that it holds, but you really kind of want it barely there. Just little wisps, just suggestions of cloud and a little bit of interest added to the sky. And again, make sure you come, if you want, just draw it right out to the edge. You can see there, you've just got these little extra details now. And when you've finished the entire piece, you can come back later on and add more in as and when you feel you need to. But there you go. That's the sky done. For now, anyway. The next part is to start filling in these houses with this gorgeous colour. And I am going to start with this sort of carded raspberry, pink, vibrant raspberry wool. Just make sure that you've got lots of lovely contrasting colours. It doesn't matter really where they are. Just make sure you haven't got similar colours next to each other so they get lost. Really thin wisps. Lay it out on the house. You can have the entire house pink, including the roof, or you can keep the roof separate, which I will do with this one, and do that in a different colour. cover the door and windows up that you've drawn. You've got your picture for reference, so we'll come back in a little while and finish those. But you can actually, with the door, you can leave a little gap where the door is if you want to, but don't worry about the windows. And just go up to where you've filled in those lines. So here I'm going to stop at the roof and I'm going to just fill in the entire front of this house with this gorgeous vibrant wool. And you could use your punch tool if you wanted for this for a multi-tool, but you can do the entire thing, as you can see, with a single needle. Just make sure it's nice and flat. You're aiming for really flat, even surface. You don't really want any 3-dimension at all for any of the houses. And then once you've got it filled in, you can go over it. You can felt some more, make sure it's, you know, nice and firmly felted. And then any gaps, you can just drag that wool across or just leave them. It doesn't have to be completely blocked in, but if you really want, you know, really dense colour, you can add some more wool. And as you can see here, I am just speeding it up a little bit using the punch tool. But single needle, as I said, absolutely fine. And it's what I use most of the time. Just going to block in a little bit more there. So we've got some nice solid colour. And the solid colour does work well. It really adds a punch to the finished result. And just bring in those edges. Just make sure that you know where those lines are so that when you come to block it in with that really nice dark outline, you can see where you are working. And just straighten out that door as well. Make sure those lines are defined. And then if you've got a multi-tool, you can go over it again just to flatten it some more. And then we're going to fill in this roof now. And I've got a really nice sort of blended, carded, mid-brown colour for this roof here. And I've added a little bit of shade in there as well. But just take tiny pieces of your wool, whether it's wool top, carded wool, as I said, it doesn't matter, and just pull away when you need to. Fill in those gaps using your lines as a guide. It's definitely a paint by numbers sort of style or way of working, should I say. And just make sure that that line is nice and neat as it goes across the top of the house where that raspberry colour finishes. And make sure it's nice and flat. And just keep working that. Don't worry about it, you know, any little gaps that you might have. Just keep going. And we've got a tiny little piece of wool here that we're going to use for the chimney. And I'm talking really, really small. You know, you can add more. So just start with, you know, less than you need. And it's probably more than you need. And then just pop that. Don't particularly shape it. Just rub it in your fingers and then pop it where you've drawn the chimney. When you actually drew the entire picture out. And just use your needle to get that shape. And these houses are quite sort of higgledy-piggledy, so don't worry about having perfectly straight lines. And then we're going to have a tiny piece on top of that, even smaller, for the chimney stack. And again, just pinch it in your fingers, mat it together a little bit, and then use your needle just to create that shape. And again, later on, that will become really defined. I've picked a really nice, this is like a burnt orange that I've carded wool that I've used next to the raspberry pink, which is a really lovely contrast. And I've decided with this one not actually to have a different colour roof. I'm just going to go with the entire house in this gorgeous, gorgeous burnt orange. And you're just working exactly the same way as you did with the first house, and then you continue, you carry on until all the houses are filled in with all those fabulous contrasting colours. And what will really bring it to life, as I said, is when you actually create that amazing outline around pretty much every area of the picture. And then any little wisps that you've got, you can you can just fold them over really to the line. You can use your multi-tools. I'm just going to show you here actually. You can take this multi-tool here, you can actually remove needles, because I don't really need 3 for this, too many. I want 2 inline needles. So I've just removed a needle. Now I think I've got 40 star needles in these. Because you're working with more needles, it doesn't distort anything, and that works really well. So that's the great thing about the multi-tools. You can have as many or as few needles as you want, and then just bring any overlapping wool up to that line, just so you've got a neat-ish edge. And you can see I've left just a tiniest sort of gap between the houses, because that's actually going to be filled in with our dark outline once you've filled the entire row of houses in. And this is just my style. This is just how I've done it. You can change it, adapt it, add in what you want. You maybe add a street lamp to the right of it. You can maybe add some bunting. And then here we're going to just complete the door. I've got mine in a different place on this one. And I'm going to put a nice yellow. It's a really bright, zingy yellow that I'm using for this door. Again, as you did with the chimney, just little pieces. Just rolling your fingers just to create a simple shape. I think I might have too much wool here, we'll see. And just fill in that door. And again, you've got that nice contrast between that raspberry and this zingy yellow. Get that nice and flat. Remember, we want it all flat, nothing 3-dimensional here. And just use your needle to create the shape. No need to do any of that beforehand. Just sort of pop your wool on and off you go. And then a tiny, tiny piece of that brown again. I'm just going to create, an illusion of a door. A doorknob, tiny piece, just pop it on and then poke it through, and it will get smaller. The more you poke it through, the smaller it will get, until you're happy with the size. And there you go. And then you can just continue to fill in all the houses and the roofs until you're ready to move on to the next stage. So I'm just going to show you quickly how easy it is to make these little windows that add real character to our houses. And you can use either the same wool that you use for the roof, or you can use a darker wool. I'm going to go with a darker wool, I think, so it creates a lot of shadow within the window. And just take a tiny pinch of your dark wool, or whatever you've chosen to use. Pop it on your house, wherever you want that window to be, and just shape it gently with your felting needle. It's no more difficult than that. It's really easy. Just poke around, create a rough shape, and we are not looking for straight lines. Do not aim for straight lines. That's not what we want, and it's really difficult to get anyway. So this is even better. And just, once you're happy with that, get it nice and flat, and then we'll be ready to add the white border and to create the frame, which will really make it pop. And what you can also do as well is, if there are lots of little wisps around the edges and you want to neaten it, just take a pair of sharp scissors, make sure they're sort of sharp and small, and just trim off those little wisps just to neaten it. That's all you need to do, but you can get most of them with your needle. And then take either your white carded wool or your wool top, pinch it between your fingers and mat it together. You just want a really, really fine, wispy piece. Hold it between your fingers. Be really careful not to poke your fingers here. And then just poke a few times with the needle at the edge of the dark sort of squarish shape that you've created, or whatever shape your window is. You don't want to overfelt, because you know it will disappear into the fabric, and then just poke that corner until it so that it holds, and just pull the wool around and continue as you have for the rest of the window. Don't worry as well if one side's a bit thicker than the other. We're not aiming for neatness here. Again, like I said, we want this nice sort of higgledy-piggledy look. And you can add the little crossbars in between if you want, so that it looks more like window panes. Exactly the same as you did with the border for the outside. And this is a really easy technique. In fact, it's all easy. It just takes time. You know, it's a picture, and this will take you some time to complete. And again, you can trim off those loose bits and then actually use them for the rest of the frames. You don't need to sort of get rid of that wool if you can use it. And you'll see really, really thin wisps. And again, you pop that across the window at the top, and then at the bottom, and then just very gently down the centre if you need to. It's not always necessary anyway. And then just trim off those final bits. And then continue with all of the houses. Put your windows randomly wherever you want to, in any shape, size or form. And then you'll be ready to add that nice dark border around these houses to make it really pop. Now you can wait right till the end of the painting, until you've finished the actual painting. But if you want to add that border in now, it will show you how much of a difference it's going to make. So you can see the lines that we're going to be working alongside each house, and we're just basically going to be filling in those gaps, making sure that every angle and every side and rooftop has a border around it. And I'm using this really nice, it's like I think this is a Jacob. This is a Jacob wool top actually, but it's really coarse. It's a beautiful wool. I love Jacob wool. If any of you have joined me in the Felt Hub on the Facebook group, you will know how much I love Jacob wool. And then again, like you did with the white wool, just mat it in between your fingers. You want a very thin wisp. Hold it with your fingers, keep them out of the way of that sharp needle, and then just poke in to those edges. Remember where you drew your lines earlier on, and you're just going to outline with the dark wool, just sort of going around the corners, taking that wool around until every sort of line and angle is completed. So here I'm just going to poke that corner in so that it holds, and then I can pull that wool across so it's nice and secure, and then take it down the side of the house as well. Again, pull it nice and straight. Make sure these wisps are really thin. You don't want big chunky pieces of wool, because that really will spoil the finished look. And you will have spent so long creating these, you know, beautiful houses, that you really want this to work. So those fine lines are what you're after. It's not difficult. Here you can see I've got that excess wool there, so I'll just pop that round and continue on to the next house. And obviously the piece you're working on will be completed with all the houses filled in with their colour. So you can just carry on in this way until they're all done. Obviously I'm not going to fill in every house on a video, because you haven't got a whole day to be sitting here watching this, and I haven't got a whole day to be actually recording either. And I can't imagine anything more boring than that. But now you know exactly the technique that you need to use to really sort of get these houses filled with colour and create that fabulous border that just makes this sort of painted with wool picture sing. And when you come to the edge here, I want to sort of start the roof separately. So I'm just going to come down here again, rather than trim that wool off. I'm going to poke it in a bit more so it's not too thick. And then I can take it at a right angle at the bottom here across the base of that first house. And again, make sure that it's not thick, that you are actually, felting it into a nice thin line. And what I've done here as well is I've taken, even though this house is all one colour, I've actually separated the roof so you can see a distinct mark where the actual roof starts. Otherwise it would have looked a bit odd just as one colour. It wouldn't have kind of made sense as a house. And I think instead of going along the base of this house here, because I'm going to fill that in when I complete the harbour wall later on anyway, I'm going to go over to the roof and we're going to border this roof so that we've got some really defined lines now. And you will see the massive difference this makes. Go straight across the roof. Don't go around the chimney. Just go straight across the roof because we'll do the chimney separately. And then just bring in those lines and just look how this now has started to jump off that fabric, and you can just see how this is going to develop, because you think once you start felting something, especially if it's a long project, you often wonder how on earth is this going to look like that, and it usually doesn't until quite close to the end. So this is just a way of showing you how quickly and easily it is to absolutely transform this into something really, really special. You don't have to be an artist. You don't have to be creative. You just have to have a little bit of enthusiasm and some time and some patience. And that's it. That's all you need. And it's totally absorbing, totally absorbing. And can you see? So I've gone around the first part of the chimney, and then we've got that little stack on top. And I want to define that as well because I want to really see that. So again, tiny, tiny pieces of wool, really thin wisps. And don't be precious. It doesn't want to be straight. It wouldn't look right if it was all straight and neat and perfect. It wants to be kind of off kilter. And there you go. You can see how immediately, we know that is a chimney and that is the stack on top of it. And then a bit later on, we'll just add some wool to a couple of the chimneys in a sort of three-dimensional way to make them look as if the fires are going and the smoke's come out of the chimneys, which again adds another level to this gorgeous picture. But can you see the transformation that has created? And then I'm just going to, I think, add a little bit of shadow, maybe just to the left of this roof. So I'm going to trim off what I've done here. So you can see that's nicely filled in now. You can always go back later on and have a play about with it if you're not happy with it, or if there's any gaps you want to fill in. But I just want to add in, I was going to add some shadow, but I think we'll go to the right hand side and we'll add the light in, and we'll do some shadow to the left of a different roof, because the right hand side in this picture is the light side. And I've just added a little bit of carded wool, and it just breaks up that colour, and again adds a little more detail. And you're talking tiny amounts, but it does make all the difference to the overall look. And then down this side here, I'm adding a little bit more wool. I'm thickening this out because this is going to be like a shadow area. So again, you don't want symmetry. You want everything to be different. So I've added a bit of the dark wool, and then the brown that I've used for the roof, I think I'm going to pop a little bit of that on just to bring it out a little bit more, but so that it's not too harsh, because that is very dark and we just want to create the feeling of a shadow. We don't want an obvious line. And you see how that is just bringing it a little more to life and adding those extra details. So carry on with all of those houses, filling in those colours and block until you've got something that looks a little bit like this. As you can see, I've added a highlight here and I've added some shadow and highlights to this roof here using the darker wool. So I've used the mid-brown wool that we have on the first house, and then I've added some darker edges for shadows. So continue to fill in the top part of your picture, and in part 3 we shall go through all those gorgeous little details for the bottom part. So have fun with part 2 and I'll see you in part 3.